welcome back to As Told by Zink with your host, Samantha. I'm in studio with Dom. How are you?
So good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. It feels so late. This is the latest podcast I've ever done. Are you
for
tired?
Real? No, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling energized. I'm good to go. I was listening to my music on the way. I feel good.
Amazing. So, do you know Rose from my team?
I do.
What is the connection?
Yes. Rose reached out to me back when I had my own little ice bath company and I was doing like ice baths as a service in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
She reached out to me to do an event with her and a brand she was working with at the time. And she was a great host and we became friends through that whole experience.
Yeah, she had nothing but amazing things to say, like hyped you.
Oh, I love that.
You can't let her down.
I won't. Yeah, that's so sweet. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, she was like, I got Dom, you're going to love him, because I keep telling, so she's one of my agents now.
Okay.
And she also handles like my podcast guests. And I
amazing.
told her, I was like, I want to go like really valuable, of like, I want a conversation where I'm like, whoa, I took so much away. And she's like, Dom's your guy.
That's so sweet of her. Well, I hope that I can deliver then.
Yeah. So I just want to like start off with your background. Are you from LA?
I'm not from LA. I'm from Montana.
Oh.
I've been in LA for going on 9 years.
That's crazy. So you're basically a local now.
I'm a bit of an Angelino. I still got a little cowboy in me though.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh my gosh. What brought you to LA? Work?
Showbiz. Yeah. I wanted to work in entertainment. I had this longing to be a part of something bigger than what I thought, home had to offer. And I think that happens to a lot of people when they're from a small town or a place that feels kind of rural and there's not a lot going on. Mm-hmm. You have there's this illustrious lure of like, I want to go to the city and do something and be part of the show. And that called to me in a big way. And that was what brought me here. But then I pretty quickly realized that wasn't like the thing that I wanted to do.
Yeah, I think I saw one of your reels and it had sort of your background. And so you've jumped around a little bit.
I would say a lot.
A lot of, yeah.
A lot of it.
Just trying to like figure out your purpose, would you say?
Yeah.
Of just fulfillment.
For sure. I think I've always been someone who jumps all in. I jump all in on things that I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. And it's a blessing and a curse. Like I obsess over the things that I do and I want to be the best at the things that I do. And sometimes in that process, when I dabble with things, getting started, I'll realize like, this isn't it. Like I'm out. Very quickly I'm out. And other things I'm like, oh, I'm going to be here for a while. Food was one of those things. I went to culinary school in New York. I cooked professionally for a while. I realized I didn't want to be a chef. I love sunsets too much. I was like, I want to get out and see sunsets. I don't want to be in a kitchen. But I loved hospitality. So then that was like, how can I do something with hospitality? And then that was music and entertainment. I was like, oh, maybe there's a career for me in entertainment. And then that took me down a path of working with alcohol brands and musicians and touring the country. And I did all kinds of music tours. And then I was like, man, this isn't it. Like, I'm not really happy. I'm not doing anything with purpose for me. And then that sort of led to this transformation where I'm at now.
So when you were touring, because I know obviously we'll get into what you're doing now, which is all things wellness.
Yeah.
When you were touring, were you like on the other side?
For sure. I was someone deeply in need of some wellness.
I assume you weren't, like recommending ice baths to everybody.
I was not. It was funny. Like the last tour that I did, I was out with a country artist. And he is known for drinking whiskey and his whiskey songs and his whiskey bars. And it was funny because that was like the last tour that I did. And at the time I'd been going through like a pretty rough time with my mental health. And I'd hired like a guru and a coach. And I was working with experts to like help me get my mindset right because I was struggling. And I was doing cold showers in the morning on tour. And then I would like wrap the night up, at the bar drinking. And then the next morning, the biohack would be like, I'm going to do another cold shower so I can feel better. So like at the end of that whole like career in music and touring and traveling, I was like starting to edge into wellness. I didn't even realize it at the time.
Before it was a thing.
Before it was like.
So when you're taking cold showers, you didn't know what you were doing? Or
I had an idea. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I had guidance. The guidance was like, this will be good for you. It's going to, it's going to bring you back to your breath. It's going to help you kind of reset and just kind of square up mentally. Yeah. But I didn't have any idea of all the benefits. And, like today, now we know so much more in just 3-4 years. Yeah.
I know. I feel like just in LA especially.
It's a hub for sure. Yeah, it's like it's like the ice bath hub of America, I feel like.
So I have something funny to tell you.
Let's hear it.
This was not even planned, but I feel like I did research for this podcast.
Yeah.
I did my first ice bath last night.
Wow, amazing. Where'd you do it at?
Did not even plan, like, Remedy Place.
Okay,
I went like
excellent.
full bouginess
Heck
with
yeah.
like my ice bath.
I
But
love it there. Yeah, that's a great spot to do it for the first time.
yeah.
That's amazing. And how'd you feel?
So I couldn't get all the way in.
Okay.
But I did make the 6 minutes.
Wow, very good.
I was yeah, I was in a pretty decent amount. And they give you booties, and
Right.
you look around, you just feel so cool. It's like very like industrial, cool setup.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I did like it, but I think I don't know, just the idea of getting my arms in there. But I
Sure.
see your videos, and you're just like submerging.
Fully, deeply in.
Yeah.
Did you feel like 6 minutes was like a big roadblock for you? Were you like, oh my gosh, 6 minutes? Or was it like, oh, okay, it's easy?
When he said it and he started the timer, I was thinking it was going to take. I was just like, "There's no way."
Right.
But what he said is like, "You'll get used to it." And like sitting there, I mean, my whole body was like shaking, but I did get used to it. So I think just as a next step, just to go in deeper.
Sure.
So, but I thought it was really cool that I could really change my mindset and almost like discipline, where it's like, okay, you're going to do this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you like? I'm always curious about people's experience getting into cold, because my first experience was not 6 minutes. It was like a minute. I got into an ice bath and was like, okay, I'm out of here. Like it was like in and out. So anyone who does like a long duration, like 2 to 5 or 6 minutes their first time, I think is so impressive, because I definitely would not have done that my first time.
Yeah.
When you were going into it, were you like, I'm for sure gonna hit 6 minutes? Were you like, let's just see what happens?
I don't even know. I didn't want to do it. I started with the oxygen chamber,
Okay.
which they lay you in there for an hour, and I'm like listening to like meditations. They have an iPad, and I went in. I'm like affirmations for attracting wealth, and then I go, and then they're like, oh, ice bath time. I'm like, I wasn't mentally prepared, but the cool thing, they offer breath work.
Right.
Which I know that you can speak to as well. But I was like, no, I was hungry. So I was like, I'm going to just do it. 6 minutes seemed like so long.
Yeah.
But I think when you're in it, it's like, for me, I'm not a quitter. So I'm like, I'm going to hit that 6 minutes. But I'm upset that I didn't go all the way.
Well, you've got more time to do it. You can do it as many times as you need.
Yeah.
Get all the way in, and just take what you need and get what you need out of it.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the takeaway for me with cold exposure. Is it's a great tool. It's a great teacher. It teaches you to notice and feel what's going on in your body. Like oftentimes before you even get in, you feel a sense of urgency, this sense of like dread, like, oh gosh, this is gonna really suck, And there's a lot of things in our life where we feel that way, where we feel like this is gonna suck and I have to do it. And I think the more that we practice doing those kinds of things and becoming comfortable with that feeling, like aware of what that feeling is like in our body, like where do we hold it? Is it in our chest? Is it in our hands and our arms? Do our legs get heavy? Like what is that feeling of like dread and urgency? And then realizing it's not forever. And the discomfort of an ice bath or a cold plunge is not forever. It's just a temporary thing. And it teaches you that you can overcome those hard things.
That was exactly it.
Yeah, totally.
And I have the same feeling with a lot of like going to the gym, doing a workout, doing a cleanse.
Totally.
But when I finish, I feel so
fasting
great.
or
I
something
look
like
so
that.
great. So it's one of those things that's temporary. You don't want it. You have to push yourself. And then just feel your feelings after. You're just like, wow, I'm on top of the world. Like you feel so good.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, and there's great science to back that up. I mean, just doing a cold plunge is going to sort of change your neurocircuitry. So when we do new things like that, the challenging things, it basically changes how our brain responds to stress and to these new challenging things that we don't want to do. And the more that you do it, the more resilient you become, or the better able you are to navigate those things that are challenging. So it's definitely good.
And I feel, you were like a true expert now. So you had your own company and now you're working at Plunge?
Yes.
Or what was the journey with the ice bath?
Yeah, so I'll back it up a little bit back. I'll back it up to that last tour we were talking about. So I was on the road and I was dealing with depression, and I didn't really realize I was dealing with depression. I just thought I was going through a hard time mentally, but I was actually like dealing with some unrealized depression. And I was traveling and touring, and I was working on a company at the time, my own company. And in 2020, I quit drinking, and that really revealed to me, like, whoa, you've got some mental health stuff going on here that you had kind of been masking for a long time with alcohol. And I was like, oh boy, like this is heavy. This is a lot. And I was leaning really big into breath work and into cold exposure as a way to just sort of deal with my feelings and deal with this depression that I had. And because 2020 is when the pandemic hit, things got really tough for me financially. I ended up having to move out of my apartment that I'd worked so hard for in Venice, and my business failed, and my relationship ended, and I had to move in with my parents at 31, and it was just like, basically like my entire life got wiped out. I just felt like I had played and worked and just done stuff all through my 20s, and felt like there was nothing to show for it. And I was kind of at like my lowest spot, and I made a commitment to myself that I would dig in and I would basically live life to the fullest. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but like, I'm not going to give up. And in that process, I started doing cold exposure and breath work every single day. And I focused on my diet, and I focused on exercise and getting enough sleep. And I think the cold exposure was like the number one thing that helped me out. And within a few months, it went from being like this thing that I would do where I was like, it was a crutch for me. I would be like, oh, if I do a cold shower, or if I jump in a cold body of water today, like, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to like, give up. Because I was at that point mentally where I was like, I was ready to be done. Mm-hmm. And I was like, maybe if I just like do a cold shower, like I'll feel good enough to get through the day. And then eventually it kind of turned into this thing where it was like, wow, it's like a performance cue. I feel really good. Like I do this and like, I feel like I can take on the day. Like I'm going to crush this. Like I'm going to get through this hard time. I'm going to get stronger. And I got stronger. I got mentally healthier. And I moved back to Los Angeles about a year later and started all over again. And I joined a startup, and the startup failed. And so I started my own little ice bath as a service company. And it was basically me with some horse troughs that you get at like the farm supply store. And I would load this into the back of my car, and I would drive around and do these ice bath events with people in Los Angeles. And that's how it started. Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy.
And so when you were dealing with mental health issues, did you research and find out that, like the cold exposure helps, or how did you come across like that as a, like helping you out?
Yeah. So I did some research, and I'd been working with some pretty solid coaches. It was an interesting time in my life because I secured some work, and I was like, I was making just enough money during the pandemic that I could either move back to LA and be like super like scrappy with my money and like kind of squeak by, or I could live with my parents for a little while, get my feet back underneath me, and work with a coach. And so I decided to stay with my parents, which I'm really grateful that I had that opportunity to do that. Mm. And I spent my money on coaching because I was like, I need to get my head right. Like there's a lot in my life that feels foundationally unstable, and I want to really figure this out and stabilize my life. And so the coaches I worked with helped me a lot along the way. And then I did start researching cold exposure, the benefits, and listening to podcasts. And Wim Hof was really emerging as a big character at the time. And I think a lot of people, I'm not alone in this story about feeling a lot of loneliness and a lot of depressive feelings or thoughts during the pandemic. And Wim Hof was sort of this, shining light during that time where he's talking about getting in cold water and just breathing and like just letting it all go. And I was like, okay, this is a really hopeful message. So I started doing that. Mm-hmm. And anecdotally, it helped me a lot. I was like, wow, this makes me feel so much better. Like I'm so much more mentally clear and capable than I was if I'm not doing this.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I love hearing that. Lately, I've just been thinking a lot about mental health, and I had lost a client / friend recently due to mental health. And I've been like so in my head about, you know what I mean? Like people's journey and how to help. Like I feel like I'm like, I want to help. I don't know how to help. I had no idea, like the cold exposure. This is the first I'm hearing about it. And I think it's almost like I meant to hear that from you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of really good resources on how and why it helps. I can just speak for myself personally because I'm not a scientist and
Yeah,
I don't
of
want to
course.
claim that. But for myself personally, what I really noticed was when you commit yourself to doing the hard thing, like we talked about, like, you know, it could be the cleanse, or it could be going to the gym, or for me now it's running. Running's the new thing that I'm doing that's like I've never done before up until recently, and it's really challenging. But it's got its own set of rewards. Cold exposure is the same thing. Like when you commit to doing it, then your neurocircuitry starts to change. It starts to adapt to that challenge. And that's a good feeling because it creates proof for you that, like, hey, I can do hard things. I can overcome things. I can do things that are uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people, when they're struggling with depression or their mental health is not doing well, a lot of times they don't feel like there's proof that they're worthy, or there's not proof that like their existence matters, or there's no proof that it's going to get better. And I think if you stick around long enough, that proof shows up. But people sometimes want to tap out before that moment happens. And so if you negotiate with yourself, you put yourself at risk of never actually seeing how good things can become, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. Or it's like that one panic attack that you just feel like there's nowhere to go because it's so
Totally.
hard in that one moment.
Totally. And I think that's, you know, for me personally, that's also a good reason why people should do cold exposure, should try it out and do an ice bath, is that there's a very similar feeling there. The panic of like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. Like, I have to get out. Like, this hurts. Like, this is terrible. If you can sit in that for a moment and just recognize what that feels like in your body, then you can go, okay, I'm actually not dying. Like, I'm actually not freaking out. Like, I'm actually going to be okay. It's actually only temporary. And if, then it's really hard to do that. Like when you're having a legitimate panic attack, like reason goes out the window. It's really tough to be logical. But I think it is one of those things that if you can practice in situations deliberately, then when things happen to you that are out of your control, you're better able to respond to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love hearing that. I'm like, it's like a moment where I'm like, I've been thinking so much about what happened and, you know, like how to really like help people and to just change that result, you know?
Yeah.
And just hearing like what you had to say, I'm like, wow, okay. I think more people. And the thing is like, you know, maybe at Plunge, if somebody can't afford one of your ice baths, you know, they are, I think, around like 4,000. Somebody can literally just put a bunch of ice in their bathtub, you know? I think everybody has access to an ice bath.
For sure. And you know, on the Plunge side, we're working on making things more accessible and making cold exposure more accessible. That's something that
Oh,
we
cool.
really want to do. You know, the whole point of the Plunge is to make it easy for people that want to do this consistently, because it is there's some work. You know, if you're lugging ice out of the grocery store and putting it into your bathtub, it requires some work, but it's very affordable. It's very doable. And you know, hopefully people, anyone listening to this that hasn't done it before, will take it upon themselves to either find a friend that has a cold plunge or go to an event. There's tons of great events, especially here in Los Angeles, but there's events popping up all across the country where people are doing workouts and then plunges, or they're doing breath work and plunges, or yoga and plunges. Going to one of those community events, it's one of the best ways to meet like-minded people, because if you're crazy enough and willing to go jump into a cold plunge with strangers, I guarantee you're going to walk out with a friend, because someone else there is, as you know, in a similar spot to you, or has been in a similar spot to you and is like down to talk to you. So I think that's also like a little ray of hope for people that might be struggling. Like, go to an event, just search events in your city with ice baths or cold plunges and go do that.
Yeah, I was seeing all the ones. So I've been to Motion LA
Yeah.
and they do it. But I was on your Instagram and I was like, the events that you do are really cool. There was
thank
one
you.
at night with like cool lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, it like looks, it's like, you know, instead of going to a club, you can like come here.
Yeah, I
kind of
think
thing.
a big piece of that is like I used to throw parties with Playboy and tour with G-Eazy and these artists, and I had a lot of fun and threw some really cool pool parties, you know, here in the hills, and that was a great time at that time of my life. And now that I don't really drink, and now that I'm, you know, in health and wellness, I still want to have a good time. And I don't want every thing I do to be like, oh, just a super, intentional, like everything has to be like super mindful. Like sometimes I just want to have fun.
Yeah.
And in my mind, doing hard stuff, the type 2 fun type stuff where you're like, it's challenging and it kind of sucks, but you're bonding with other people. That's like my favorite kind of fun. And so we started doing these plunge club events where we would basically just invite people to come out and plunge. And it's kind of anticlimactic because it's like you literally show up to jump into cold water, like it sounds like, okay, that's kind of crazy. But the vibe of all the people and how good you feel afterwards, everyone's kind of on a high and people are open and willing to connect and down just to hang. And it feels really good and it builds community and it's very social.
Yeah, I mean, it is so true because there's a different type of high. When you're drinking, it's like in the moment it's fun, the next day it's horrible. But I realized I've been getting into health and wellness a lot more recently, and I'm not really drinking as much anymore. And I have this crazy energy.
Yeah.
Like it's a little like I'll wake up also with Celsius's help, but but I'm like an Energizer bunny now, where I feel like alcohol was just making me so sluggish and lazy and exhausted all the time. And now that I'm cutting it out and I'm working out at least 5 times a week and trying things like the cold plunge, I have this like crack like energy, which I've never had before, and it's like the coolest feeling.
That's great. Yeah, we just gotta get you to do a cold plunge first thing in the morning now, and then see what's going on.
I know.
It'll be next level.
I'm in the market.
Okay, cool. That'll be the next. That'll be the next unlock. The morning plunge.
I am definitely in the market. I was so in, and it's really fun. I had I had Sasha from Motion LA come on the podcast, and we were talking about like sober dates, and everyone's like, oh, I can't, not drink on a first date. And there's so many like health and wellness things that you can do on a first date.
So many. And which
are fun.
If you're doing that on your first date, like you're doing something that's more health and wellness, like one, it already says that person's willing and intentional enough to do health and wellness things. Like they're open enough to do that, right? Which is probably a green flag. And then you also don't have the risk of all of the things that happen if you drink too much on a first date, where it's like you completely miss the red flags, which was basically my entire 20s.
Or you are the red flag.
Yeah, or in the case of my 20s, I probably was the red flag. So you don't miss out on like all of those signals that the other person is telling you, when you're sober and when you're doing something intentional for your health and wellness. Whether that's just like a sauna session or a cold plunge or going on a run, going on to the run clubs, all those kinds of things. Like those are all great ways to meet someone in a setting that isn't promoting you feeling less, which alcohol does. Alcohol wants you to feel less. It's like it's numbing what you're actually feeling so that you can feel more open and you're more accepting because you're not feeling everything.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's just so much to do now. I'm like, you don't have to have the excuse of like, well, we need to like go and get drinks. It's like in LA, you can go on a hike. There's so many places like Pause Studio, Remedy Place, where you can do the sauna, do the ice bath. Totally. Running, I don't know about running on the first date, but
yeah, it's for a specific group of people. I'm sort of in that spot now where I'm like, my mom was talking to me the other day, I was just checking in on friends and people in my life, and I was like, Mom, if they haven't been running with me, I don't know how they're doing, because I've been so intense on running the last like 2 months. I just ran a marathon and a half marathon, and it's eaten up all of my time. I was like, Mom, I have no idea how anyone's doing if they're not running with me right now, because that's pretty much like all of my social time.
So for like friend dates, you're like, hey, let's go for a jog.
Straight up. Yep, that's it.
Okay.
That's about all I've had time for. It's like either jog or like come over and sauna and plunge, and we'll do like a little contrast session. We'll do like 14 to 20 minutes in the sauna, and then a couple minutes in the cold plunge, and then another 14 to 20 minutes in the sauna, and then do that 2 to 3 times based on everyone's schedule. If they have time to do it 3 times, we will. Yeah. And then hang out afterwards. Yeah.
You're like, I time blocked you for an hour. Yeah. We did our thing. I'll see you soon.
Kind of. It's been a little bit crazy.
Yeah. I also saw that you do habit stacking, and maybe do you do time blocking too?
I do mainly for work. It's kind of how I wrap my head around like the work that I do, because I tend to get lost in the sauce pretty easily. Mm-hmm. And so I try to time block out like my most important tasks and just be like, I'm going to, whatever the most challenging thing is, I try to do that earlier in the day. get it done, and then move on to the things that are a little bit more fun. Just mainly for the dopamine regulation. And what I've noticed is if we do too many things that like make us feel good in the moment, then we tend to get stuck and procrastinate on the things that are a little bit harder. And a whole big piece of my life and like my wellness journey is like choosing to do the hard thing, because I found that the more that I do the hard thing, like the better and easier my life gets. So that's kind of how I use that.
Yeah, I know. I tell my team all the time, I'm like, because they're like, I have so much going on and things will fall through the cracks. I'm like, use your calendar, time block, like set up like
Yeah,
a whole
some
schedule for
boundaries.
yourself.
Yeah, that's the other thing is you can just like set some time aside where you're not available. I think sometimes we get really overwhelmed when we feel like we're too available, and like everyone can, check in with us. Like just set a couple hours to yourself and do your work and check in with the thing that you're doing and check out of what everyone else wants, and you'll probably feel a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, it is so true. My calendar is like, it doesn't make sense to anyone but me.
Sure.
But I need it to survive.
Well, I bet yours is probably pretty crazy too, because you have clients and
Oh, yeah.
all kinds of obligations and
But I
meetings.
put reminders in there too.
Yeah.
I'm like, my calendar is like the only place that like will grab my attention.
Right.
It's like, you need to do that, like everything, literally. If I need to tell somebody something, it's in there.
So you gotta just block it out and make it work for you.
Yeah. I mean, there was even this entrepreneur that said he like time blocks time with his family. What are your
Whoa.
thoughts on that? Like getting to a place where you have to be like, here's an hour for my children.
I don't know. I was in a relationship where it was kind of cruising that direction, where it was like we had to schedule time,
Oh.
to see each other, and it was kind of like getting to the point where I was like, I don't know, is this really like the vibe for me? Probably not. I think that for family, at least, I try to spend a lot of time with my family when I can. They're not here, and so I travel back to Montana fairly frequently to spend time with family, and it's one of my values. And I think that in a relationship, and like especially if it's your own family, you should be as available as possible, and not just available, but also as present as possible when you're with them. And that's, I think, a big thing for me is it's not necessarily about the quantity of time, but like how present are you with the time that you do have. And so if like time blocking and saying like, hey, I only have 2 hours where I'm like truly present, but I'm going to be fully present, then that's better than being available for hours on end, but you're on your phone and distracted and not being a very good partner or parent or whatever.
Yeah, no, that is definitely something that I've been trying to do more because I'm like, I'm with my partner or my family, but I'm also so like, I'm half like dialed into emails and texts.
Totally. Yeah.
So it's about like actually being fully present,
Totally. What do you do to get more present? Like, what are some of the things that you do?
I really I try not to go on my phone. I really do.
That's right. It's like the biggest distraction, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
it immediately pulls you into other thoughts or other work that you left off and that kind of stuff. I find too, like my phone's definitely the biggest distraction in my life. I also find that like if I start my morning intentionally and I'm like a little bit slower in the morning and I'm not distracted in the morning, it's like there's a clear start to my day. Like I'm like choosing to start my day with work, and then it kind of helps me like stop my day if I see the sunset. So, and I've done so well with this at different chapters of my life, and now I feel like I'm not doing as well. So this last week I've been more intentional about seeing the sunset, but if I can like take a pause and literally watch the sunset, I mean, the sun sets in about 15 minutes, right? It goes from like seeing it till like it's gone in less than 15 minutes. And if you can do that, it's almost like mentally you can just like, okay, cool. Now I can take a break. Or if you have to go back to work, it's just like this nice little pause in the day. So that's like what I've been doing to try to just have that cutoff moment. Because otherwise I'll just keep working into the night. And then I'm like, next thing I know, I haven't eaten and it's 8 p.m. And I'm like, what's happening here?
And the worst is you work from home.
Yeah.
That's the worst because I'm like, I've literally sat in my kitchen all day. Like
I know, I do the same
you
thing.
don't have fresh air. You don't like see humans.
Haven't eaten. And I'm like, that's my big thing is I'll start working and then I'll forget to eat or drink water. And it's been hours. And I'm like, this is not who I want to be. So then I'll go outside and I'll do some breath work and get some sunshine and I'll do whatever I can to like put these breaks in. And I'm doing a lot better about scheduling in the middle of the day. But I think sunset is one of the most important things for me, just to mentally process the day and be like, okay, I'm giving myself permission to start the day, and then I'm giving myself permission to like end the day.
Yeah.
even if I go back to work a little bit more afterwards and do some projects, I just don't feel the same sense of like pressure that I feel if I just work straight through. Like, you know, that feeling of like you're working and then you look up and the sun's already set and it's dark and you're like, wow, where'd the day go?
Yeah.
That feeling to me isn't very empowering.
And do you ever, if you're not doing that, you're like, whoa, it was Monday, now it's Friday.
Totally.
What have I done all week?
Yeah, totally. It's like
Like,
the
am
whole
I,
thing,
like I, yeah.
whole
like,
thing's a blur.
like I'm going to be 65 in a week at this point.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But when you're like slowing down and watching the sunset, it's like, okay, like closing out the day.
Totally.
Like I feel like it makes you more present.
Totally. And I think you can, and then you can stack. So kind of going back to the habit stacking thing, then you can start to stack stuff. Like if you're consistently having a clear start to your morning, like this is my bad habit is like sometimes I'll, get up and I'll look at my Instagram and I'll answer a message from yesterday and then I'll share a video and then an email and this is priority. And then I've already been working for an hour before my day starts. I haven't even eaten. I've already been working for an hour and my day is just kind of like scrambled versus like if I get up and I take care of myself and then have a clear start to my morning, then you can start to stack kind of backwards of like, what's your morning routine? Well, my morning routine is maybe it's just a 10-minute walk or maybe it's just some stretches or some breath work or yoga or whatever the thing is, cold plunge.
Yeah.
And then the same thing with the evening. You can start to stack that in. Like maybe at sunset, you journal for 10 minutes while the sun sets. And then it's just 10 minutes for you to get those feelings out and get those thoughts out and kind of clear the canvas a little bit. Or maybe you call a loved one just during it, and call someone that you love during the sunset and just check in with them. And it's a nice way to like have that connection and community and a little bond.
So how would you define habit stacking? It almost sounds like time blocking, but routines or...
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. It's the same kind of concept as a time block, but basically you're just trying to make that time as efficient as possible. So habits are more likely to stick when they're easy and when they're kind of piggybacking off of something else you're already doing. So if you're consistently already doing something else, it's easier to add something to that thing you're already doing than to start something brand new. So like the example is like the happiest I've ever been, I think the best like morning routine I've ever had. I was listening to Atomic Habits where I was learning all about, these habit stacks. It's a book by James Clear and he talks all about the science, the neuroscience of building habits and making them stick. And during that time, what I would do is before I would go to bed, I would make my overnight oats and I would basically make my entire breakfast the night before. So it's like, it's done. I don't have to think about it. And then go to bed. And then as soon as I woke up in the morning, I would only look at my phone to listen to this audiobook. So I wouldn't like check my Instagram. I actually had one of those timers set up. So like my apps weren't available. Even my email wasn't available. So I'd wake up and I would just listen to this audiobook and I'd eat my breakfast while I walked around the neighborhood. And, where it originally started was like, I just want to listen to the podcast and go for a walk in the morning because it feels good to get up in the morning and go for a walk. And then during this whole time, I'm learning about the benefit of getting sunlight in your eyes in the morning and what that does to your hormonal health and your mental health because our eyes, when we get infrared light from the sun, it basically changes the way we produce melatonin, which has a whole like chain reaction to we stop producing cortisol. Like there's all these things that happen just from getting sunlight in your eyes. So I'm like, oh, well, this is like a total biohack. Like I gotta do this. But then what was happening is I was really enjoying these walks and I'm like walking for 45 minutes, listening to this book. And I would come back and I didn't have time for breakfast and then my day was still kind of scattered. So I'm like, I'm just going to add it all in one. So I'd eat my overnight oats, go for the walk, listen to the audiobook, get the sunlight in my eyes. And it was like, boom, there's a habit stack. And that worked great for me for quite a while. But then I moved and then it kind of fell apart and I don't do that habit stack anymore.
At least you're honest.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm super honest about it. And so I've dabbled with it, like versions of that sense. And I love it. Like every time I can do that, I love it. I'm not super consistent with it right now with my schedule, but it's one of the happiest moments I've ever had was like that stretch of time where I was super dedicated to that. And I just did it every day. And it was like, this is great. I have breakfast. I listen to the book. I get sunlight. It was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I need to start doing that. I just, people ask me all the time, they're like, what are your, like routines are so important to entrepreneurs. For the longest time, and I mean, I started a company and I have a lot of different things going on, but people would ask me like, what's your routine? And I'm like, I literally have zero routine.
Sure.
Like I wake up because I also thought like, do I want to like relive the same day?
Yeah.
Like the movie where they can't get out of that
it's
one
Groundhog
day.
Day, yeah.
And so I was in between like wanting, like obviously to be healthy and well and like clear-minded, but also I don't want to live the same day over and over again.
Sure, I get that.
So I was kind of like, I don't want to like do that same morning.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I think a lot of people benefit from having like a very strict routine and doing the same thing over and over again. They're like, this is like what I have to do to be successful. And that's awesome for those people. And I actually believe in that in a lot of cases. I'm a little bit more of a free spirit, and the sort of the term that I've coined for myself is like my wellness toolkit.
Yeah.
And so I think of it as like I have a toolkit. I have like a whole toolbox I can open up, and there's like tons of tools that I can use for different purposes or different outcomes that I want. And generally I feel good if I use one or two of those tools. So like that could just be like morning stretching, direct sunlight in the eyes, breath work, a cold plunge, being just barefoot on the ground. Like those are all things that make me feel good. And if I do 2 or 3 of those in the morning before I start my day, it's like I check the box. I'm like, that was a great morning. It's not necessarily like I have to get up and I have to do 15 minutes of breath work and I have to ground for 15 minutes and I have to do a 5-minute cold plunge, and that's just too much. It's like exhausting to me.
Yeah.
And I would rather just like pick and choose like a couple things. And what I will do is I'll look at my week, and based on like what like the schedule is going to be, like how stressful it's going to be. Like I know that Wednesdays and Thursdays for me typically are pretty busy, like really busy days. And Thursdays I schedule my calls earlier in the morning for East Coast people in New York. So my calls will start as early as like 7 or sometimes 7:30. And I'll do those calls on Thursdays, so it's like an earlier morning. So I'm not going to do a cold plunge Thursday morning. It's just because I'm going to get the extra little bit of sleep, and then I'm going to go right into work. And I know that. So I'll do the cold plunge on Wednesday morning or Friday morning, and that's just like how I work it in. And I don't feel guilty about changing up my routine,
Okay, thank God. You
Yeah.
said that, because I just feel like such an outcast.
No, not at all.
I see all of these entrepreneurs and influencers, and they have their routines, and they need to like.
That's because
stick
it's
with
selling
those.
right now. Everyone's selling it, but like I just don't think it's sustainable. I think you can sustain 2 or 3 really solid habits consistently. And I think like the biggest thing for me lately has been a gratitude practice. So I just have been really intentional about it. Like when I wake up in the morning, I just start with gratitude. Like, what am I grateful for today? And it sounds so cliche, but I've been through some stuff in the last year. Like I had open heart surgery a year ago, and that was like a realization that like your life could change forever. Like if the surgery doesn't go right, that could be a huge bummer for all of my goals, all of my athletic endeavors, everything that I want to do, in terms of running and doing races and like this endurance lifestyle that I'm really drawn to. If my heart surgery hadn't gone as well as it did, like that would have been in jeopardy. So like that's something I can be grateful for every day. And like my parents, and like there's like all of these things I can just kind of go through and be like, I'm really grateful for this. I have a house. And you can get as granular as you want to, but that has just helped me so much. And then once I'm like in a state of gratitude, it's like pretty easy for me to do one more thing for myself, whether that's the breath work or the stretching or the cold plunge. It's like, okay, I can do one more awesome thing for myself. And my days are so much better if I do that,
Yeah.
But I don't think it's sustainable to do a 30-step morning every day. I just think it's so much, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
And same thing with nighttime too. Like there are people that have these crazy nighttime routines. Like I think try to limit your cell phone use before bed and try to like have a little wind down moment for sure. And if you can do some journaling, you should do that a few nights a week, and that's going to improve your quality of life. But like I don't think anyone should feel guilty because they're not doing 12 steps to better sleep or whatever.
Oh my gosh. I don't even have a skincare routine. I sort of just wake up, and my work, if I'm planning a workout, I do it like the day before. Like I don't have like a set schedule. I'm like, my days are always different. Obviously, I want to, like to your point, I want to do things that are good for me.
Of course.
And I do, but they're not like the same. I'm not living the same day over and over again. So I call it rituals, not routine.
Yeah, rituals, right. Because you can come back to rituals. Yeah. Rituals are awesome. I like that.
So when you're doing your gratitude list, I have to ask you, do you write it or say it in your head?
I say it. Sometimes I write it though. Sometimes I write it.
do?
Yeah. I would say it's probably like 70%. I say it out loud though. It's not just in my head. I say it out loud. And then like maybe 30% write it.
Okay.
So like on the more disciplined days, I write it, but that's probably like 30%.
Yeah. I do it too in my mind every day. But it's shifted. And I think yours probably has as well. Where in the beginning, when I was maybe like 25, it was like, like wanting to attract more wealth or love. But now I always start with health because, losing people and like seeing people like lose their health so easily
Yeah.
and you can't control it. So now I'm always like, I'm grateful for everyone's health. Even my dog, he's like one at the top.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Anyone that you care about. And also just for yourself, like a thing that I'm grateful for, this comes back to this whole gratitude practice. I'll think through scenarios where like I had discernment or I was able to just understand, like recognize like a situation for what it was. And I'm like, I'm so grateful that I had like the mental capacity to recognize that for what it was. Like there's times where things happen to us, like someone might say something and it's not about you, it's about them. Or, maybe with you, like a client gets bent out of shape about something, something didn't go right. It's like a lot of times it's not necessarily about you, it's about a situation that happened that you don't necessarily have control over, or maybe just, you did have control over it and it just didn't go perfectly, but you don't have to take it super hard. And I'm really grateful for the moments where you can recognize like things for what they are and be like, that's just like, that was just a bad day, or that was just like a thing that happened and I'm going to work on that. And I'm grateful that I can consciously recognize that this isn't my identity. Like I'm not a bad person because this thing went wrong. And I'm not like letting people down left and right. Like that is what it is. And like, I can move on. And I think like consciously recognizing things for what they are is actually like a huge blessing.
Oh, for sure. Or, I think when you're younger too, if something doesn't work out, it's like the end
Big
of the
one.
world and you don't get it. And you're like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me? But you should learn to realize that it's a blessing that something didn't work out.
Totally.
Maybe it's a job, a relationship, moving. Like there's so many different situations. But the older I've gotten, I'm like, okay, if that didn't work out with that person or that job or that client or that brand or whatever, that's a great thing because it's
Totally.
like bringing me to where I need to go and like leaving that space open for what is meant to be.
For sure. I wouldn't be here right now having this conversation with you if my company had worked out, in 2019 and 2020. And if things hadn't gotten hard for me, I wouldn't have made the adjustments that I made that have led me to this very moment, right? When I was working with my coach, he had a huge impact on my life, one of the things he kept saying over and over again was like, you have to switch your mind into thinking that this is happening for you, not to you. And it's so easy to say that to someone. It's really hard to actually believe that. But once you're able to believe it, like you really believe that everything that's happening, good or bad, is happening for me, and like then you can become the hero of your own story. That's when you get that main character energy where you're like, the plot's gonna get crazy, but I'm gonna get through it, and I'm the hero of this story because it's happening for me, not to me. And all of the hard things that happen, like losing my job, and then my company starting to fail, and then my relationship failing, and all of these things made me who I am today, and have now allowed me to help other people. And it all happened for me. But at the time, it just felt like, why me? I was very much the victim of my circumstance. But now I'm like, oh, that's amazing that happened to me because now I get to do this, and I have so much more purpose in my life.
And I'm sure you probably weren't thinking this while it was happening. If somebody is going through a rough time and they're confused and things aren't aligning, what is your advice to them if they're like in the thick of it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think the first thing is have a little grace with yourself. If things aren't working out, sometimes we want to jump into like an answer right now. We want an answer right now. Why are things not working out? Is it this? Is it that? And it's probably not just this or just that. It's probably a combination of things, and you're going through it for a reason. And maybe that reason is that you need to just be kind of more quiet and just let things kind of quiet down and listen for the whispers. Like there's this idea that like God speaks in whispers, right? And the devil yells at you, right? It's like all the things that you don't need are like yelling at you, like, come over here, come do this, right? But the things that you do need, it's like a whisper, and you have to be still and quiet enough to hear it. So I think the first thing is like, just have a little grace for yourself and just try to quiet all the noise and just like listen for the whisper. Like, what's intuition telling you? And intuition's going to say, hey, you're spending time with the wrong people, or hey, you're chasing the wrong thing. Like your motivation is about maybe the wrong things. It's not really like coming from a pure place. And then you can reevaluate that stuff and be like, what are my intentions? What is my motivation? And then I think you're probably gonna get pretty clear really quickly of like, all right, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, I want to do this thing, or I want to feel this way. What are the things that are compromising how I want to feel? Like, I love this idea of like, how do you want to feel day to day, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? If I asked you right now, like, how do you want to feel 20 years from now? What would you say?
In that moment, or
Just,
like,
yeah,
I want to
like
feel
20 years from now.
accomplished for sure.
So a feeling of accomplishment is something
Yeah.
that you want to have 20 years from now. So that's like a guiding light to you of like, when you have the opportunity to make choices, like, is this choice going to add to my feeling of accomplishment? And if it's not, then I can probably say no to it. It's probably okay. Right? Like, and you can just kind of take that as far as you want, as deep as you want. Like, I want to feel satisfied 20 years from now. I want to be like, wow, I'm really satisfied with my effort. I'm really satisfied and happy with like how I treated people and how I showed up for other people. Like, that's how I want to feel. I don't want to look back and be like, man, I got what I wanted, but I like screwed a lot of people over, you know, along the way. And I like ended a lot of friendships, you know, at any cost. I want to be like, wow, for 20 years, I did nothing but like build friendships and like build the community and bring people closer together. That's like a feeling that I want to have. And so when I get into these situations that like maybe things are, there's a little tension or a little aggression, I can be like, is this getting me closer to my goal or not? And I'm like, man, if it's not, then I could probably let that go, for whether, you know, it's from me or the other person.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny once you get to a place where you're, you know, like feeling what you've always wanted, like at peace
Yeah.
with yourself. And you look back at the struggles and it's almost like you kind of laugh because in that moment, you just think like you'll never get out. And one of my favorite quotes or sayings is, "In time, this too shall pass."
Yeah.
Because when you're in anything negative, you just feel like you'll never get out.
Totally.
And then you look back and it's just like the funniest thing.
Yeah,
That
and
is the best way to describe it, because then you'll have everything and you look back and you're like, but I'm so glad I had to go through those struggles, learn those lessons, have the ups and downs, because journey is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's just the journey. And it never ends either. Like
It never
once you're
ends.
in a good place, like something will happen and you'll have to go through a whole nother journey. But that's just life, right?
Totally. That is just life. And I've been working on recognizing that more in the moment, like really trying to recognize it in the moment of like, man, we're in it, you know, and it's a crazy feeling. Like when you're just any given day, you're doing something, and you're just like, I'm just experiencing this thing. Like this, did I choose to be here? I don't even know. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like I did, but like maybe I didn't. Like and I'll just kind of sit back and be like, whoa, we're really just in this thing of life right now, you know? And to me, that's like, it's wild. And then it's up to us to decide in the moment, like, do we want to make this a good experience or a bad experience? You know, like you can just make it whatever you want it to be. Like you're totally the creator of your own experience. It's crazy to me.
Oh, no, I think about that all the time, is like the journey. And it just, you know, it breaks my heart when people go through negative things and they think everything's ending. And for me, I'm like, that's beautiful. And they're like, Samantha, what are you talking about? I'm like, it is so beautiful to go through struggle.
Yeah, we get to do that. I mean, we get to do that as part of our life. When I was dealing with the depression, you know, I was really considering ending my life, and I felt guilty even thinking that, right? But I was just at this hopeless point of like, what's the point? Like, I don't think I have anything left to give, and I didn't really think that things were going to get better. And thankfully, I was able to get through that time. But now on the other side of it, you know, I've made this commitment to like, no matter how hard things get, I'm gonna just stick to life. You know, I'm choosing life because I think it's gonna get better consistently, and that's proven to be true with me. Like, after I was dealing with the depression, I started getting really healthy. I've been doing cold plunges and cold showers and breath work for months, and I got physically really strong. I was the strongest and most fit I'd ever been. Felt great, and then I had this issue where I thought I was having a heart attack. Something was wrong with my heart. And so I go to a cardiologist, and I find out that I have an aneurysm in my aorta, and my aortic valve is in need of surgery. And it was just like, oh man, like I had just committed I had just gotten my head around like life's going to get better, right? And I was starting to feel like life's getting better. And then I'm faced with this uncontrollable thing. Like, it's completely beyond my control. Like, you're not allowed to, lift weights anymore, and you can't do all these things that you love. And my whole identity had gone from being this person who toured and, partied with rock stars and, that whole life, I like my identity was wrapped up in pool parties in the hills and like being that guy. And I had gotten fit and healthy. And now I'm like, I can't be fit and healthy. Like, I don't even know who I am anymore, And back to what my coach was saying, like, it's happening for you, not to you. I just had, at that point, like, all of those feelings, all that depression, all of that doubt came back up for me again of like, oh man, like, what's the point? Like, it's going to get hard, It's just like, what's the point of even trying if this is life? But then it got better. Like, I had open heart surgery. I had a best case scenario surgery. I recovered. A year later, I ran a marathon. Like, life gets better. You just got to keep showing up.
Yeah. And do you think that one of the factors in the beginning was struggling with figuring out or finding your soul purpose? Like, why am I here?
Yeah, I think I think always had. I feel like I've always been able to hear, like, I mean, I call it God. I think it's God, but I feel like I've always heard this like voice of purpose. And if I slow down enough to listen to it, I can hear it and be like, okay, I'm on the right path. Like, it's not like, do this thing, but it's like this sort of intuition that like I'm on the right path, or like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I think I abandoned that for a long time and like quit listening to it. And that took me on a pretty wild journey. And I think once I finally like surrendered myself and humbled myself and just sort of like looked for it again, it showed up again.
Yeah. So it was just sort of, I think a lot of people don't know to just like sit in silence and listen.
Yeah.
They're a bit more like closed-minded. For me, it's like I call them epiphanies in my life.
Yeah.
It's like this little voice inside of me telling me to do something, and I listen. I'm like, say less. And then it brings me to where I need to go. But if you're just like out in the noise and everything and you're not listening, things just get chaotic and complicated, and you're not feeling bliss. And I don't know, it just, you're like, why am I here? What am I doing? And you just you're in this constant state of confusion. But then sitting in that silence and listening to your intuition, you find clarity and peace, and like, I'm here for a reason. And I need to keep going.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm glad that you do that too, because a lot of people just don't know to like just sit at home by yourself. You don't always have to be around other people's energy. I think that like sucks it out of you.
Totally.
Like, you need to like be by yourself, sit in your own energy, and be like, universe, what do I need to know? Where do I need to go?
Yeah, totally. And that, I think for sure, that's super important, of just grounding your energy. I mean, if you want to get woo-woo about it, like putting your bare feet on the ground is good for us. Our body's supposed to have a negative ionic charge, so we're supposed to basically be grounded. We're supposed to ground into the earth, and that's supposed to change like how our body feels. And if you get into the ocean's full of salt water, that grounds the body. It pulls electricity out of the body. And we're in a state of constant stimuli and inputs and all this stuff coming in, pouring in, people's energy, people's expectations, our calendars, our social media, all of that stuff. And we have to live with that. Like, that's totally, I accept that. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't just take a pause and ground and find a little stillness.
That's the part I'm missing,
Yeah.
is the nature part.
Yeah.
That I need
Totally.
that I need to do more of. I need to walk bare feet in the grass.
Me too. I've been doing it in the mornings. But like I said, I've kind of been missing out on sunsets a lot lately. Like, this year has been my worst year on record in like probably 4 years of catching sunsets. I don't know why. I just haven't prioritized it. And I think we tend to do that. Like, when we're doing really well, like when we feel like we're doing well, we neglect the things that are the best things for us. Like, whether it's your diet or your sleep patterns, like, oh, I feel great. Like, I don't need to sleep very much anymore, or like, I feel great, like whatever. And then you get sick and you're like, I gotta sleep and I need downtime. And, like you reprioritize all of those things when you really need them. But I went and did an ocean plunge the other night, at sunset.
Oh,
so my buddy and I went and jumped in the ocean, and it was just like, it's 15 minutes, that we just run out, jump in, watch the sunset, come back out. but feels so good afterwards.
Crazy.
So refreshing. Yeah.
I'm just like thinking like would never do that.
We
I know
did-
how cold that ocean is.
We did go get in the sauna afterwards, so we kind of cheated a little.
Yeah. I mean, I think like what happens, I'm like with you where I'm like, I have a habit and I stick to it and I love it. That's reading or like podcasting. And then as soon as I slip, I can't get back into it. So I always hold myself accountable by like starting something. So I stopped reading and I love reading. So I started a book club. So I'm like,
That's
okay,
great.
now I have to read. I have to show
that's
up,
great.
right?
Yeah, accountability goes a long way. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love
or
that.
like the podcast, like I just do something where I'm like, I have to do it with a friend because then
Yeah.
you have to show up for them.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's
great.
like my number. But yeah, you always sort of like with the sunset, like, okay, my friend is coming. I can't just ditch.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that accountability in that community is, that's like one of the secret, like magic pieces of life is like having that feeling of community and, camaraderie or companionship. I love it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, this has been an amazing conversation. I
Yeah.
want to end on a positive note.
Okay.
Will you give me an Erewhon vibe check?
An Erewhon vibe check. Okay. So the Erewhon vibe checks for me are like, you can do it two ways. You can either invite all the homies and you roll in together and just see what the vibes are, and then you sort of set the vibe and be like, we're going to, be a little chaotic in here and we're all going to get the same smoothie.
Okay.
Or you can just roll in by yourself, see what the vibes are, try a new beverage, and then tell everyone what you think the vibe is and invite them out to the next one, which is what I do a lot. So I'll go by myself and I'll just be like, the vibes are, So my whole like rubric for this was, did I see someone famous? How was the beverage that I was drinking, and how many parking spots were available? So that was like how I would measure it. And I'd be like, available parking spots, beverage is really good. Didn't see anybody famous, but that's okay. I'm going to say it's like a 7 out of 10 tonight. That's the vibe. So that's how I would do it.
Okay. Who have you seen famous?
I've seen a lot of people. I mean, I've spent a lot of time at Erewhon, so
I
more
feel
time
like
than
I
I'd
never
like to.
see anybody, or I'm not like looking, or maybe they're there and I just don't notice.
I've seen. I'm pretty good with faces. I've seen a fair amount of actors, a lot of influencers, obviously. It's kind of been all over the board. I've seen a lot of people that are. I mean, I think the person, like probably the most famous person that I feel like I run into all the time is Jay Alvarez. And I always like bump into him. I'm like, hey, Jay, what up? And then, it's like, I don't know Jay. But he'll like see me and be like, what's up? Because I look like me, I guess. And it's always this like weird, like, moment. And then I'm like, we're not actually friends. But we see each other at Erewhon.
That's too funny. And what is your like go-to order?
Go-to order. I've been on the pot pies lately because there's a lot of calories and I'm running. So, and it's also funny. So my ex-girlfriend was big into chicken pot pies, which I thought was like the most basic thing ever. And I was like, yeah. Like,
did she make them?
She would make them. She was obsessed with them.
All right.
Yeah. And I was just like, chicken pot pies. Like, I think it's just like, ugh. And then I got a chicken pot pie from Erewhon and it was like, this is amazing. And so now I eat them at least once a week. I eat a chicken pot pie from Erewhon.
Wow.
So that's my go-to. Leisure Project is probably my favorite beverage right now. Hi-O, close second. The Haley Bieber soft serve is pretty fire right now. So yeah, those are my go-tos. A midday,
It's actually good.
so good. You got to get Haley's Way though, with the peanut butter and the.
I know it looks crazy.
So good, yeah.
I need to get it. I'm that person that do you always get the same thing?
I do.
Okay, me too.
Pretty
I'm like I
habitual.
need to like expand a little.
Yeah. What's your go-to?
So I'm at the place where I'm like, I order my lunch and dinners, and
Yeah.
I always do like the protein in two sides.
Yep.
I usually do salmon because I'm trying to be healthy. What happened to the orange chicken, by the way? You can't order it.
It's gone. I know.
It's
I've
gone?
noticed. Yeah.
Okay, well, I have to speak to someone about that.
Have you had the poke?
No.
The poke's pretty fire. I
It
was
is?
shocked. It's like actually really good. Yeah.
Did you ever get the sushi sandwich when that was hot?
I remember. Yeah, I remember. I actually.
I was
I never
scared.
got it though. I never got it, but I have a friend that would get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. If
I was always like, I don't know. There's so many things like that where I'm like, I just don't think this is for me.
Yeah,
And then,
love
yeah.
sushi, the sandwich. I wasn't feeling it, but
Well, given the whole thing with the pot pies, maybe I should try more things.
I have not thought about pot pie since like the late 90s.
Yeah,
That's
right, I know.
crazy.
They're so good. There's so many calories. Like, I've been running a lot, so
Yeah.
there's a ton of calories, and it's like it kind of hits the spot.
That must be nice. I mean, to be a guy like wanting
Yeah.
all the calories because you're running, I'm like,
as many calories as
Be
I
a
can get right now.
man.
Yes. Yeah. I guess it's working out my favor right now.
And then this is just on my mind, but if somebody's visiting LA, what's your favorite restaurant or like place to hang?
Okay, visiting LA. I mean, we already talked about Erewhon a lot. I think it's a great place to pop in.
Yeah, you have to. You have to
gotta
like
do the
go
thing.
and
Get a
see.
smoothie. The new
Yeah.
smoothie with Barcode and Winnie Harlow is pretty incredible. I just had that. It's a big vibe.
They should pay you.
I know they really should. I would say that Ice Pass is a really cool thing. So you can do sauna and cold plunge with a group of people.
I've never heard of this.
Ice Pass is based in Venice,
Okay.
and they do like what they call, I think it's a sauna social is what they call it, on Friday nights, and they bring a DJ out, and there's like literally a couple hundred people, and they come out and they cold plunge and sauna together, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I would say Ice Pass is a really cool one. The Venice Drum Circle, super fun. All of the hikes in the hills. So if you can hit Runyon or any of those places, get a little hike in. That'd be probably my hit list of things you should do.
No, that's great. I mean, I even learned I didn't know about a couple of those, so thank you.
Heck yeah,
I
for
feel
sure.
like there's so much to do. I'm like, when you come to LA, it's like as a local, if you look at like TripAdvisor, it's like obviously all of those, but there's so many like hidden like local gems and things to do that you can never be bored.
Totally. LA, I always say that LA is a great place to live and kind of a hard place to visit because like
Yeah.
there's so much to do, and it's like, how do you make a choice? But,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so true. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I
This
appreciate
was
it.
like,
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I feel like I have so much information. It was such a valuable conversation.
I'm happy to hear that.
That was one of my New Year's resolutions. I'm like, get people on the podcast that can bring value to others. So I
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Until next time, y'all.